Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. So for this video, I'll be summarizing the article "Understanding the Black-White School Discipline Gap" by Josh Kinsler. And it was actually originally published in the Economics of Education Review in 2011. So I'll walk through the study's research questions, methods, major findings, and then explore what this means for us as educators working in multicultural classroom settings. So, as you can see, I have the research questions here. And, Kinsler investigates why black students receive more severe disciplinary actions than white students. So he simply asks, to what extent is the black white school discipline gap explained by differences in student behavior? Are racial disparities driven more by individual behavior or by school level disciplinary practices? And do schools with higher suspension rates impose harsher discipline overall, disproportionately affecting black students? And to answer these questions, Kinsler really analyzes quantitative data from schools in North Carolina. The data includes detailed information on individual student demographics, test scores, and disciplinary infractions across these various schools. He actually also uses a fixed effects regression model, and he does it to control for variables such as student academic achievement, economic status, and school characteristics. And this actually allows him to isolate the effects of the school level discipline policies and compare outcomes within schools and then between schools as well. Um, in this method, it actually can really help schools examine their discipline data. And it isolates the impact of the school policy culture on the racial disparities. And ultimately, this can actually really help change school policies by really influencing doing things such as adopting restorative practices or with professional development and training the staff to recognize our implicit biases we may not know that we have when it comes to our disciplinary decisions. So our major findings would be our first finding would be that black students are more likely to be suspended than white students. And this is even after controlling for behavior and achievement. And, Kinsler finds that the data supports that black students face higher rates of both in school and out of school suspensions. And this is even after controlling for things such as test scores or behavior history and socioeconomic status. In fact, there's still a significant racial disparity that remains. And all this does is suggest that behavior alone does not account for the discipline gap, and that there is, in fact, systemic and structural factors in place that we also have to consider. The second finding would be that the racial discipline gap is larger in schools that already have more punitive discipline practices overall. So schools that suspend students at higher rates for all races show a widened black-white discipline gap than schools that suspend students at lower rates just in general. So this is going to imply to me that school level policies and not just individual student behavior can also drive those disparities. The third finding that I read was that most of the gap is due to between school variation, more so than within school bias alone. Because when we compare the students within the same school, the discipline gap is smaller. But when comparing across schools, the gap widens significantly. So all this does to me is point to differences in how schools operate rather than how individual teachers treat their students. And when it comes to how the findings address the research questions, when we reflect back on the first question, is the discipline gap explained by student behavior? To me, the answer is no. The gap persists even after controlling for things such as behavior or test scores and other factors. In fact, the implication is that the discipline disparities can't be attributed solely to the differences in the student conduct, but also there is a need for teacher training. There is a need for teacher reflection. Us educators, we have to be able to understand how our perceptions and decisions of the actions can influence our outcomes when it comes to disciplinary measures. We have to be trained on that. Question number two was, do school level policies contribute to the gap? The answer is yes. Schools with those harsher discipline practices disproportionately impact black students. This implies that the administrative culture, to me, and the policy severity definitely have an influence when it comes to racial disparities within discipline, which to me highlights leadership accountability. Principals, administrators, they need to shape the school climate and the discipline culture. They need the tools, the data, and responsibility, and they have the responsibility for creating that equitable environment on campus. And the third research question: are some schools driving this pattern more than others? Answer is yes. The largest disparities exist between schools and not just within them. To me, this implies that addressing discipline equity requires systemic reform, not only at school level, but at the district level as well. The need for resource equity between schools and culture responsive discipline models district-wide is absolutely necessary. All right, with the next slide, some implications for practice. Train educators to recognize and mitigate implicit bias, replace zero tolerance for restorative justice practices, create culturally responsive classroom environments, and analyze discipline data to identify and correct these disparities. So when it comes to the first one, train the educators. Kinsler's data actually aligns with the findings that we had from the Kirin Institute article that we read in the last module. That discipline disparities are amplified by these unconscious stereotypes. We as teachers, we need provided that ongoing professional development, specifically around implicit bias and culturally relevant pedagogy. And then that way we can understand where these implicit biases may be coming from and how we can correct them within the classroom. The second one, replace zero tolerance with restorative justice practices. Recognize that cultural differences in communication, behavior, and expression, that could be misinterpreted. It can be misinterpreted as defiance and as misconduct, when in reality it's just a difference in culture. So the action steps I would say would be use restorative justice, use positive behavior interventions, and really try to have that some culturally anchored management strategies in place for the classroom. For the third one, create culturally responsive classroom environments. Schools with punitive cultures disproportionately discipline Black students. So my solution would be to create that safe, affirming environment where students have voice, identity, and their dignity are essential. Also, and for the last one, analyze discipline data to correct the disparities. Use the data. Schools can conduct regular equity reviews. You can involve family. You can involve students in the process as well. So this type of research really pushes us as teachers to look beyond the student behavior and ask how our own systems, our own biases, and policies might be contributing to these racial disparities. As I mentioned with the previous Kirin Institute article, the author actually argues ambiguous situations are ripe for the arousal of implicit bias. So in other words, when we have to make those quick decisions about these subjective behaviors, we might see it as disrespect or noncompliance due to our unconscious associations. And so this can lead to harsher disciplinary actions, which tend to be put on more students of color. So this just further reinforces Kinsler's point in his article, that the discipline gap is less about behavior and more about how certain students are perceived and how they're treated within the systems that are in place. So for areas of further research, there should be further research on teacher level decision making and implicit bias. How do these individual teacher perceptions and expectations contribute to the disparities when it comes to behaviors such as disrespect, such as defiance? Another area of further research, impact of restorative justice in high disparity schools. What happens to racial discipline gaps over a specific time frame when schools implement restorative practices? A third one would be role of race and representation in school leadership. Do the schools with more diverse leadership teams exhibit fewer disparities in discipline outcomes? These are all areas in which further research could be done, especially over a long-term time frame that I think could be beneficial to studies such as this one. And by creating these classroom environments that value student identity, voice, and culture, we can actually reduce the risk of biased disciplinary practices and create that more equitable educational outcome. So in summary, Kinsler's work really shows that the Black-white discipline gap is not just about student behavior, but that it's deeply rooted in school systems, and that also implicit bias, which in order for us to change, requires both policy reform and also personal reflection. Um, anyway, that's my article review. Thanks for watching, and let's all just keep doing the work to build these inclusive and supportive classrooms. See you next time.